I think there's an assumption that men know how to bring a woman to orgasm. And women don't ask for what they need. So I think there's a lot of different reasons. What you see in the medium, what you see in movies, what you see on television shows when you're watching sex, right? And I'm not talking about porn. I'm just talking about, and porn too, right? And porn too, is that what you're seeing is penetrative sex, which is how men orgasm. But women need clitoral external stimulation in order to orgasm. 95% of women do.
Mm.
And so if you're only focused on the penetration, you're missing out on the female pleasure. And it's not that that part is not pleasurable, it's just not going to get her there. She needs
Absolutely.
external stimulation. And only really
Absolutely.
3 to 5% of women can orgasm from penetration alone.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today, I'm honored to have Eve Hall with me. Eve has made it her mission to bring out the sexual beings that women can be, but that maybe in modern society get so diluted, get so overwhelmed with so many other tasks, so many other things that often enough women have lost themselves when they're in middle age and think, who the hell am I? And he helps them to go back to the most feminine part, their sexuality, and is fostering a healthy sexuality. When I read that, I thought I need to talk to this woman. So Eve, thank you so much for coming onto my show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
And pleasure is really a key word here, isn't it? Why is it that there is a demand for your services? You would have thought today in 2025, women are emancipated. They're out there. They are going for everything. They are breaking the glass ceilings. They are becoming powerful beings. Their feminism is big out there, at least if you believe the media. Why do we need to talk about an orgasm gap?
You know, I agree with you. There is a lot more chatter and a lot more talk about sexuality and sexual health. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation. And in our society, right? In our society, we also have the purity culture that girls have to be good girls and women have to conform and be smaller than they are. There's a lot of reasons why women are inhibited sexually. I like to help people to really hone those
Mm,
skills. And really, it's all about communication. It's about
mm.
communicating your needs, your wants, your desires with your partner. And oftentimes, women don't feel comfortable with those conversations. So I can help them to sort of tune into what those desires and needs are, and then help them to really communicate that with their partners.
If women are not able to communicate, being typically labeled as the perfect communicators, the women who talk, 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 hang on, there's something wrong. Are we not talking, not a problem about women, but a problem about relationships and trust with their loved one?
I think trust is foundational in any relationship, right?
Mm,
But oftentimes we're taught by our families, our religious institutions, our society that having conversations about sex is not a good thing. It's a very taboo topic. So a
mm,
lot of times people really feel inhibited around having conversations around sex.
mm,
And the orgasm gap is something that exists only in heterosexual relationships where women are experiencing less orgasms than men, and it's significant. And it's across the board from hookups all the way to marriage. So it's not just hookup sex, right? It's even in marriages that the orgasm gap exists. So I think it's really, really important for people to understand that that is a thing, right? It
mm.
is a phenomenon that happens. And when I first learned about it myself, I thought to myself, well, gosh, there's an explanation why I have been having these experiences myself. It was sort of like an aha moment, right? Like, oh my goodness, everyone needs to know about this because if you don't know that there is an orgasm gap, you're never going to be able to close it for yourself.
Mm.
And it is very, very possible, to close that orgasm gap. It
Mm.
just takes, self-reflection, and it takes education and empowerment.
Weird. Had we had this discussion in 1980, I maybe would have bought into it. I maybe would have thought, absolutely, yep, we need to do something. When I was a young man, and I was reasonably promiscuous, and of the women that I got together with, there were probably 50% who had never experienced an orgasm at all. So, and I rectified that. And but that was, I would have thought that was then. And also, these were young women. I mean, when I was more hunting and being out there, I was in my 20s. Let's call it like the 20 to 30. So, okay, is that an issue that affects young women? And is not over time things better, both as far as now, 40 years on? I mean, the Kinsey report, that was, for crying out loud, we've got the data is out there. So why are things not getting better?
I think there's an assumption that men know how to bring a woman to orgasm. And, women don't ask for what they need. So I think there's a lot of different reasons. What you see in the medium, what you see in movies, what you see on, television shows when you're watching sex, right? And I'm not talking about porn. I'm just talking about, and porn too, right? And porn too, is that what you're seeing is penetrative sex, which is how men orgasm. But women need clitoral external stimulation in order to orgasm. 95% of women do.
Mm.
And so if you're only focused on the penetration, you're missing out on the female pleasure. And it's not that that part is not pleasurable, it's just not going to get her there. She needs
Absolutely.
external stimulation. And only really
Absolutely.
3 to 5% of women can orgasm from penetration alone. It's a very small percentage. So
Mm.
if people don't know these statistics, right, they're not going to understand. And what they're seeing in porn, what they're seeing
Mm.
in the media is
Mm.
penetration. They're going to be focusing on only that.
Mm.
And so what I like to talk about is how we can really expand our view of
Mm.
sexuality and create the whole entire body as being an erogenous zone, because no
Mm.
matter where you touch on the body, it can be perceived as sexual pleasure.
Mm.
And when that sexual pleasure is perceived in the brain, the clitoral area of the brain is stimulated, whether you're touching the
Mm.
nape of the neck, or the
Mm.
big toe,
Mm.
or the
Mm.
clitoris.
Mm.
So it's really just a lot of information that I think is just not out there, and that I think people really need to know about, so that they can
Mm.
really get their pleasure needs met. And it's really both for men and for women, because I think that men really truly want to pleasure their partners.
Yeah.
And like you said before, when you were out there and you were hooking up with women, or
Mm.
dating at your most busy, right? You were able to sort of pleasure your partners, and many of them, you said even probably 50% had
Okay,
never
yeah.
experienced
Yeah.
an orgasm
Yeah.
before, right? And
Yeah.
if they're telling you that, that's a big deal,
Mm. Mm.
and also I will bring up here too that 80% of women have faked orgasm in their lives.
Mm.
So that's another thing that you really need to consider, because a lot of times women are, not being really honest when it comes to their sexual pleasure. And it's because of this orgasm gap that exists. And, if we only knew that we needed to speak our truth, speak our what we like, it would really be able to be closed.
Mm. I go 100% with that. Yet, why do women not speak out to their partner? Why is that
You know,
hiding? I mean, it is, you're talking about societal pressures that are maybe that are put down very early in their life. You need to be a good girl, and girls
mhm.
don't do that, etc., etc. These are core beliefs that are wrong, in my opinion,
Right.
and they are not serving you. That's absolutely clear. So, are we not again talking here about an issue of us not being emotionally intelligent? of us not actually having looked down into our soul and try to figure out who we are, and that we have become far too busy in our daily lives to even think about joy in general and sexual satisfaction in specific.
I think that that's part of it, and I love that you mentioned joy because I love to consider the bedroom the adult playground, right? And
Mm.
a lot of times people don't really think about exploring in that playground, right? They're always going to ride the same way every time, right? And exploration is and having diversity in
Yeah.
your exploration sexually is really like the spice of life, right? And so I think that yes, societal norms do really impact women, and there's always a new generation coming up. But I'm not even talking about just the new generation coming up. I'm talking about women in their 30s, 40s, 50s that have never experienced an orgasm before.
Mm.
Why? Because they've never learned how to have that open communication with their partners. And so now they're 20 years into their
Mm.
marriage and they're
Mm.
just, having sex maybe just as out of obligation instead of really looking at it as a place where they can gain that joy,
Mm. Mm.
gain that fulfillment, and really gain that confidence. Because when you are having amazing orgasms on a regular basis,
Mm.
you're going to have an amazing sense of confidence in your body,
Mm.
and
Mm.
when you have that confidence in your body, it really translates to all areas of our lives, and that's what I like
Mm.
to call big
Mm.
clit energy.
Mm. Mm.
Big clit energy, not that the clit is big, right? It's just like big dick energy. It doesn't have to do with the size of the clit or the size of the dick. It has to do about the energy that's created when you have a fulfilling sex life. And so I like to teach
Mm.
women how to really gain that confidence.
Mm. Do we have data that looks at masturbation and pleasing yourself among women over the years? What is the incidence of women pleasing themselves? Because that must be very closely related to the ability to achieve an orgasm.
Yes, and I love to talk about masturbation because masturbation is so important to knowing your own body.
Mm.
Once you know how you can orgasm, then you can bring that information to the bedroom. If
Yeah.
you have never orgasmed on your own, you will have much less of an ability to translate that information to your partner,
Mm.
and much less success in having orgasms. So masturbation is key. And, it's interesting because there is a lot of data around masturbation. And when you look at masturbation with women and men, we can basically come, right, or have an orgasm around the same amount of time. It may take a man 2 to 4 minutes, right? And it may take a woman 3 to 5 minutes to orgasm
Mm.
with masturbation. It's
Mm.
very, very close.
Mm.
But when it comes to sexual encounters, men are ready in a very short time, 2 to 3 minutes, boom, there's an erection and they're ready to go, right? A woman takes much longer to get there, in terms of being ready
Mm.
for penetrative sex. So women
Mm.
take 20 to 25 minutes to really get ready, get warmed up, and the clitoris,
Mm.
the female equivalent of the man's penis, must become engorged. And by engorged, I mean the blood needs to flow to that area and
Mm.
it needs to fill up with blood, just like
Mm.
the man has an erection.
Mm.
And many people don't know about engorging the clitoris in order to pleasure the woman and get them
Mm.
ready for
Mm.
penetration. So what we
Mm.
find oftentimes is that women will have painful sex because they're not prepared. So really
Mm.
slowing down and understanding your body and knowing what you
Mm.
need is so key. And masturbation is one of those tools that I like to
Mm.
talk about
Mm.
so that people can really truly grab that information, bring it to the bedroom, tell their partners exactly what they like,
Mm.
and get their pleasure needs met.
Has the use of oral sex changed over time? Because I think with oral sex, you typically target the clitoris and give it the respect that it deserves. Would that not be the logical solution in a couple's sex life?
Yes, and there's a wonderful book called She Comes First that talks about, how to give amazing oral sex to a
Mm,
woman, right? And there's just so much more information out there on how to really pleasure a woman in that way.
mm,
But yes, oral sex is something that, is important for female pleasure. I
mm,
will say though that, unless you, test with the other person, oral sex is another way that STIs can be spread. So it's really important to really have these conversations before you have a new sexual partner
mm.
about not just penetrative sex and using a condom, but also protecting yourself with oral sex. So that's one of the things that I always like to
Okay.
caveat when I talk about oral sex, because
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, oral sex is amazing. And it's a wonderful way to stimulate the clitoris and get that woman engorged. But you have to protect yourself. And I like to consider myself the face of safe sex.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
do always like to talk about safe sex as well, because, not everybody is in a marriage or in a monogamous relationship, and we
Okay.
need to protect ourselves. But
Yeah.
oral sex is one of the most fulfilling ways for a woman to reach orgasm or get prepared for their body to move on to the next phase of, sex, which would maybe be
Mm,
penetration, right?
mm,
So, that is something that is really, really something that I definitely encourage everyone to explore. And there's really, so many different erogenous zones on the body.
mm,
Obviously, the genitalia are really the most sensitive, and the direct link to the clitoral stimulation in the brain, but also there's other parts of the body that are extremely erogenous as well. So really
mm,
exploring the whole body is something that I really try to encourage as well.
mm, mm. There are a number of love languages out there. Is there a difference between people who have identified touch as a love language, as their love language primarily, and the way that they can achieve orgasms?
Well, the love languages are really essential in knowing yourself, and
Mm,
how you can really gain what you need from your relationship, right? And so, if you know your love language, you can really understand what you need, and you can translate that to your partner. So, I think it's
mm,
really good to find out, what your love language is, and also what your partner's love language is,
mm,
because love obviously is, can really enhance sexuality. Love does not always exist in every sexual experience, but if you are
mm,
trying to, gain a higher connection with your partner,
mm,
and it's a relationship that is a loving relationship, it can really transcend you to new
mm,
heights. So yes, if your love language is physical touch, most likely, and I don't know any statistics around it, but most likely, you're going to be on the higher end of accepting that
mm,
physical touch and that
mm,
pleasure from
mm,
that aspect. But
mm.
sometimes affirmations, can be very sexy during sex, right? And so there are different things that you can bring into the sexual experience. It
Absolutely.
doesn't always have to be physical touch, right? So affirmations, some people love dirty talk, and whatever that may be for you, really thinking about the love languages
Yeah.
and how they can be incorporated
Yeah.
into your bedroom experience.
Exactly, because that's so often the case. I mean, especially women who sort of say, "Don't touch me. I want to talk to you." So their intimacy needs to be, I think, you need to lead into intimacy by creating that safe environment that might not be the touch. It might actually be another form of showing love to your partner. Therefore, that's where I find it so much more than just the clitoris or how to kiss or how to be so specific. You need to provide the safety in the playroom to allow relaxation. If you're constantly in fight and flight mode, not much will happen. That's pretty much a guarantee. And we have got this problem that, what is the incidence? One in six women will have had a very negative sexual experience. In other words, a abuse or a rape And these numbers are daunting because they're playing in the subconscious. So we
Absolutely, yes.
we
Hmm.
need to be safe. We need to provide that safe environment, that understanding environment, and then miracles can happen and fireworks happen in the playground. Would you not agree?
Yes, I would agree. And
Good.
I am glad that you brought that up because 25% of men and 35% of women have had sexual abuse in their history.
Well,
And so when you have that history, it is going to inhibit you in many ways in your
mm,
sexuality. And so working through that trauma is so key.
mm,
And, we all have trauma, we all have baggage in different ways,
mm,
and so working on yourself and trying to heal from those
mm.
aspects of your life is going to bring you closer to being able to experience the true joy and pleasure of sex.
We talked about the clitoris, and that is a beautiful, beautiful target. Now, there is this ominous and well-hidden G-spot, and some men get quite focused on that, and I need to find that mystery spot, and if I just touch it, then everything will be fine. What do you think about that?
You know, some people swear by the G spot, and some people have no idea about the G spot and or where it is in their bodies. I personally don't know where my G spot is, if I even have one. When you look at the anatomy, there's really nothing showing that there's a G spot there.
Yeah,
However, some women swear by the G spot and that
yeah,
it's on the anterior part of the vaginal wall.
yeah,
And the clitoris is an organ that is big and it's extensive and it's almost the size of the penis, but it's internal, not external, right? So you
mm,
don't see all of it. You only
yeah,
see a small external portion of it, but it wraps around the vaginal opening and it
mm,
lines the walls of the vagina at the opening. And so I think that if you are targeting that area, right, where the clitoris is and the clitoral bulbs and the legs
mm,
that wrap around the vaginal opening, you're going to
mm,
be hitting that quote unquote G spot. And that is what you're going to be experiencing. So
mm.
whether you have a G spot or not is irrelevant. If you know what buttons to touch, that's the most important thing.
That's a perfect answer. I love that. I absolutely love that. And with the G-spot, just a word to maybe the younger men and less experienced men out there. If you're going nuts there to the anterior wall of the vagina, anterior means the front, sort of towards the tummy, towards the belly button, so to speak. Remember that there is the bladder, and there is some women can get easily cystitis, so an inflammation of the bladder. So if you're massively trying to stimulate the front there, you might actually give your partner quite a lot of pain for the next day or two if there is a cystitis building up due to that. Um, I think the reality is what you're saying is that anatomy is more or less the same, but the way that emotions are mixing together with physical stimuli are very unique. So each and every woman will have a different combination of these things. And it's really us being observant, trying something, see what happens. So kiss here, and you might get a and kiss there, and you might say, nah. Listen to that. It's a beautiful communication that is happening there. And if you start exploring things and are gentle, until you get permission to be more aggressive and masculine, then this is a beautiful, it's a dance, isn't it? It's a dance, it's a back and forth, and you're playing together. And if you dance well with your partner, wow, if you ever see a tango being performed well, my goodness. And it's the same with sex. And I think that is something that we've forgotten. So you're not just stomping your feet. You can dance a tango if you so wish to do so. Respect your partner. And I think that is so beautiful. How can we teach that though? This is this is so such a issue of respect and of serving the other, and that seems to be missing.
Yes, yes, I agree. Unfortunately, we live in patriarchal societies, right? And so women are often disrespected. And, if you can only appreciate their divine femininity and their ability
Yeah,
to receive, and all of the beautiful things that come with being a woman, if men can really respect all of what that is to be a
yeah,
woman, I think it really can enhance the pleasure that you are creating in the bedroom.
yeah,
And I love that you mentioned dance, because dance is a beautiful way to, in a vanilla way, to really connect with your partner. And,
isn't it?
when they move backward, you move forward, etc. And you're
Mm,
really creating that connection,
mm,
in your bodies. So dance is a beautiful way to sort of connect on a level where you're not horizontal yet, right? But it's also very sensual.
mm,
So
mm.
even though you may not be the most amazing tango dancer, right? If you are tuning into your partner's movements, your partner's breath, your partner's
Mm,
energy, you're going to
mm.
experience it so much more, explosively than if you were just focusing on yourself.
I think that's, you've nailed it there, isn't it? This is this connection, and it can be magic. Often enough,
Absolutely. Sex magic exists.
oh, absolutely. I have encountered that so often in the first 3 months of a relationship. But then later on, you're getting married, you're together, or in a long-term relationship, that magic disappears. You can touch the neck and kiss the neck to the 15th time, and there will not be that rush of dopamine coming down on you. How do we get that dopamine flow back in a long-term relationship?
Relationships go through that honeymoon stage, right, where everything is just wonderful, and there are different phases of relationships, and it's very common to lose that sort of spark. I think it's important to schedule time
Mm.
to be intimate. And a lot of times people think, oh, well, that's not spontaneous. That's not what we see in the movies, right? It's always got to be spontaneous, and they've got to pick you up and throw you against the wall and like pin you there. And it's all this passion and everything. That is not the reality, right? The reality is not always that, it's a spontaneous experience. And if you're always waiting for a spontaneous experience to happen, it will never happen, because guess what? When you get married and you have kids and you have a job and you have all of these other responsibilities, your mind is filled with lots of other things that you need to do, right? And so other things can get in the way. So if you can schedule time,
Mm,
on a regular basis to be
mm.
intimate with one another, and
Yeah,
then have that time be sacred, right?
yeah,
And have that time be something
yeah,
that you look forward to, and that you
yeah.
are curious about, and that you're creative around, and you're trying to explore new things each time, or you're bringing in, different
Mm,
toys, or different sensory play, or something
mm,
that you want to try that you've never tried before, and you're
mm,
having this really open dialogue and communication with your partner about
mm,
the things that you want to explore, and you're making time for that. I think
mm,
that the sky is the limit in relationships that are long term too. And,
mm,
I've spoken to people on my podcast, that have, focused on this area of their lives after being married for over 20 years, and said,
nice.
I would love my sex life to be delicious. And right now it's just and so how can we really, hone that? How can we really develop that in our
Yeah,
relationship? And
yeah,
when the partner agrees, you gotta take hold of that and run with it, But
that's beautiful.
the first thing is having those conversations, and those conversations are sometimes difficult to start having when you've never had them before.
I come from Germany, where nudity is relatively normal. Many lakes, etc., have got one area of the beach where it's FKK, means free body culture, where you don't wear anything. On the contrary, if you go in there with something on, people will approach you and say, "Oi, trousers down. This is a naked area." So we seem to be more in tune with our bodies. Does that also mean that the Germans are more in tune with their sexuality, or that cultures which are more open to displaying nature, that they are open to sexuality?
I definitely think there is a difference between European culture and American culture. You know, we are still very, very much in the United States based on a very pure culture, purity culture, you know,
Mm,
and it's very damaging to women this specifically.
mm,
I think Europeans are much more open minded. And also, not only that, but there's more sex education that exists
mm,
just naturally in the schools, and so
mm.
there's less, there's less rape, there's less sexual assaults in Europe, in certain parts of Europe, than in the United States, for instance, and I can't get into all the details right now because I don't have all of that information
Mm.
in my mind, so I won't
Sure.
tell you exactly, but absolutely, I think that when you are comfortable being naked,
Mm,
you know it is it's just the most natural way to be.
mm,
We come into this world naked. Nudity is not a sexual experience. Nudity is
mm,
just a way of being, right? It's just you without clothes on. It doesn't mean
mm.
that you're suddenly sexual because you're naked. And that's why, there is a difference between, being a nudist, right? And maybe like being a swinger on the other hand, right? That
Okay.
also likes to be nude. But,
Mm,
nudists are just comfortable in their own skin. And when you are
mm,
comfortable in your own skin, that just makes a world of difference in terms
mm,
of you being connected with your body and you being able to express yourself in a
mm.
way that purity culture really inhibits.
Let's talk about swinging. It's a lifestyle and having sex with different partners while still being actually in a fixed relationship with someone. What is the difference to exploring your sexuality with other partners? And I mean, on the one hand, we have got betrayal, we have got the negative side of it, you having an affair with someone else, and for many couples, that's the end of their relationship, the end of their thing, and swinging. What is okay in your more enlightened look at sexuality? Is it okay to swing? Is it okay to put your own needs before that of a relationship?
Well, I don't know if necessarily swingers are putting their own personal needs in front of the relationship. It's the relationship that wants to incorporate those aspects into their relationship together. It's really a team effort, right? When you're talking about a couple that swings, right?
Okay.
So, I like to look at the umbrella of ethical non monogamy, because there's monogamy and then there's ethical non monogamy. And, there's a place for both. Certainly, if you're in a monogamous relationship, there has to be trust in the
Mm,
in the
yeah.
foundation, and you are expecting that your partner is never going to cheat on you, right? But many, many people cheat. And unfortunately, humans are not very good at being in monogamous relationships. And
Mm,
so I do love to talk about ethical non monogamy because I think it is another option that many people don't know about. And under that umbrella of ethical non monogamy, one of the, sort of branches is swinging, where couples or singles, have multiple partners,
mm,
and sometimes they engage in group play with other people. Sometimes it's a threesome, sometimes it's another couple with another couple. I mean, there's just, the sky's the limit is in terms of the
mm,
combinations that you can
mm,
have.
mm,
But that is a way that you can sort of explore your sexuality when your partner and you are open to that. It takes a lot of maturity and it
mm,
takes a lot of communication,
mm,
because when you're entering into that world, you have to be on the same team.
mm,
You have to be entering it wanting the same things,
mm,
wanting to really expand your sexual pleasure
mm,
with each other, by bringing in
mm,
someone from the outside, right? And
mm,
then there's polyamory. Polyamory is the idea that that love is infinite. And I truly believe that love is infinite. I
Mm,
don't think that, you necessarily only can love one person. I think,
mm,
especially if you are, say, bisexual, you really have the ability to love more than one person, right? And if you are
mm,
only in a relationship with a man, but you're bisexual, there's always going to be that curiosity about maybe exploring with a woman, right? So I think that having, an open mindedness about
mm.
relationships and thinking about relationships as being modern relationships or open relationships, right, is something that people should think about, because monogamy is not the only option out there. And,
Mm,
in our Western culture, monogamy is sort of something that is sort of taught as we grow up. And, then the
mm,
pinnacle of that is getting married and then being with that one person,
mm.
right? But there's so many more options out there that I think people should really understand and know about, because, monogamy is not necessarily for everybody.
A lot of fighting talk here from you, Eve, for those people who strictly believe in the pinnacle, as you have called it, that there's only one partner for the rest of our life. I'm a swan. I have my partner. That's it. And I can't comment. I have been a wild man when I was younger, and then I made personally the commitment to say, no, I'm now married, no more, no other women as far as sexual encounters are concerned. But these are all decisions that we have to make ourselves. There's no right or wrong. There is just
Exactly.
you feeling right in your skin, and each lifestyle will have their risks, will have their benefits, will have their satisfaction for you. And again, no one can tell you that, let's say, an S&M lifestyle is wrong. No, it's just something that either you like or you don't like. And there is S&M sadomasochism, which refers to the fact that you include pain and in your sensations, or humiliation, things like that. And it might sound absolutely bizarre for someone, but if you go one step back, take the pain out, but be dominant, be strong, live your femininity, maybe with being dominated, for the man to actually really show your masculinity in all the right ways with dominating the other person. That can be a huge, huge, beautiful step forward of exploring your sexuality. The reason I say that is women in nowadays society often want to be everything. They want to show their power. They want to show their, I am the girl. I can do it all. I can be the housewife. I can be the mother. I can be a sexual partner. I can break the glass ceiling. I'm going to be the CEO. Yeah, hang on, girl. You're spreading yourself rather thin. And to actually take a step back and say in the bedroom, you know what? I really don't need to be that leader. I actually can be led. Now, that can be a very freeing experience. As such,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Hmm.
please, please.
I'd love to jump in here because 45% of Americans consider themselves kinky, and the BDSM world is growing and growing by leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And playing with submission and dominance is something that everybody can do.
Mm,
Most women typically are more submissive than dominant, but
mm,
exploring your dominant side is really a fun thing that you can experience, and men tend to be more dominant in the bedroom than women, but men exploring their submissive sides can also be a really beautiful escape and way to sort of let
mm,
go and to
mm,
enjoy the
mm,
experience. So, thinking about, what sorts of things you want to try in the BDSM world, right?
mm,
And you
mm,
mentioned masochism and sadism, but there's bondage also,
mm,
which is something that a lot of people
mm,
like to explore as well.
mm,
And so there's just so many things that
mm,
you can really introduce into the bedroom to really create a lot of different varieties of sexual experiences that can really blow your mind. And that's what we all want, right? Is to have
Mm.
mind blowing sex. We don't want to just have mediocre sex. We want to have mind blowing sex. So I love that you brought up kink and that you brought up the BDSM world, because I think that there is so much that we can learn from that world.
Mm.
And the biggest thing is communication and negotiation.
Mm.
And those are the things that,
Mm.
they're really, really good at. And they create the scene before the scene happens, right? And that's what they call a sexual experience, is a
Mm.
scene. And they talk about all of the details.
Mm.
They talk about their safe words. They talk about what they want. They talk about what they
Mm.
are absolutely a no for them that day. They
Mm.
talk about what they want to explore, what toys they want to use, what bondage they want to experience,
Mm.
what, you know, um, impact play they want to experience. There's
Mm.
so many things that they talk about before it even happens, right?
Mm.
And so when they enter into the scene and they're ready to go, they have, an outline of what they are going to experience, and they have a way to communicate. Stop, slow down,
Mm.
go, I want
Mm.
more.
Mm.
And a lot of, heteronormative relationships are not having these conversations. Most of them are not,
Mm.
I would venture to say. And so when you are, taking that information, taking that education from the
Mm.
BDSM
Mm.
world and applying it to your relationship, you really will have a much more fulfilling sex life. So I just love that you brought up kink.
Beautiful, Eve. I never really put that together, but of course you're right there. And it is the communication that is so advanced. Equally, that communication, when I look at homosexual encounters amongst men, it's so much simplified because there is a very clear yes, no, etc. There is a different way of communicating and yeah, spelling it out what you want. My goodness, how easy would that be? When most people don't really have a clue what they want. Coming back full circle, they never had an orgasm. Now, leave alone exploring the a different way of experiencing sexuality is way beyond their grasp. So we need to come back to the basics. Learn what your body really needs, and that might change over the years. You might be when you're
That's
20,
right. Yeah,
you might be 20 and you're flexible as hell and you do the Kama Sutra backwards. And that's all cool. But then when you're 45 or 50, things don't bend so much anymore. And then things might change. And that's absolutely okay. The question is, where are you right
absolutely.
now and where do you want to go? Are you fulfilled? Well, I doubt it. You wouldn't have listened in this interview this far down the line. Um, so I think there is so much that we can gain by increasing our emotional intelligence. And sexuality is a huge, huge, huge part of that. So I'm so glad that I had you here, Eve. You're an amazing woman to speak so openly about actually quite often taboo subjects. I mean, we touched about virtually everything in sexuality here, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. You're an amazing woman, Eve. Fantastic. If people
Thank
want to
you.
know more about you and maybe want to touch base with you, get in touch, maybe get led by you in your movement, how can they do that?
Absolutely. I want to just say one thing about homosexuality because you mentioned it, right?
Mm.
And also in homosexual relationships, whether it be between two women or two men, right? They also have to have this
Mm.
communication
Mm.
because, the parts don't line up like, in a heteronormative relationship, right? So
Yeah.
they have to know who wants to do this, who wants to do that. And so communication is so key. So if you need help with learning how to communicate, I suggest that you go to pleaseme.online. That is my website. And on the contacts page, you can find all of the links to all of my socials and follow me on whichever one you like the most. But you can certainly reach out to me on pleaseme.online, send me a message, and I would love to continue the conversation there.
Brilliant. Guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast. You have it all there. And I encourage you to explore your sexuality. If you have not masturbated before, I encourage you to create a safe place where you explore yourself. I think that is such a beautiful way forward. Get to know yourself sexually and then take it from there and move forward and become the new and improved version who can communicate, who can fulfill your own needs. But for that, you need to know them and you need to find out ways how you can achieve that. So, no, this was a very open and a very beautiful conversation. I could have not wished for something better. Eve, thank you so much. You're an amazing guest.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And you guys out there, look after yourself, live with passion, live with intention.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.